I like the code that we wound up with in the previous video, but it's not the first way I thought of writing this function. So let me show you what the first way I thought of writing this function is. And it's going to include if statements, and it's going to include checking if a number is even or odd. So let's just start out with, let's call it alt2. My list. In this case, we're going to start out with an empty list. So in some ways, I mean, this code is a little more complicated than it looks because hidden inside of this line here is this definition. Okay, so it's about 5 lines longer, or maybe 3 lines longer than it looks. So here overall, this is going to be shorter, I believe, or at least it's not going to use any auxiliary functions. So we want to go through all of the different possible slots from 0 up to and including n minus 1. And then for each of those slots, if it's even, if the index is even, we want to append 3. And if the index is odd, we want to append 8. So for I in range n, and here I want to check, is it even or is it odd? And so let's see how to do that. If you type I equals 7, for example, and on a Mac, I inserted this new cell here by holding down Option and hitting Return. On a PC, that is probably either Control or Alt. I'm not sure exactly which one, but you can try them out and see which one works. And so if you want to know, is this 7 an even or an odd integer, you can use this percent operator. And think of this as like the remainder in division with remainder. Or if you've seen modular arithmetic before, like in Math 13, then think of this as reduction mod 2 in this case. And so in this case, we get 1. So that's saying this 7 here, this is something of the form q times 2 plus 1. And so that plus 1 is saying it's odd. And if instead it was an even integer, then we would get 0. And those are the only two possibilities when you have integer percent 2. So here I want to know, is that an even number or an odd number? And we're going to do this using an if statement. So the syntax is if, and then whatever condition is true or false, followed by a colon. So in this case, let's say if I mod 2 equals 0. Okay, now this is indented 3 levels, one for the if statement, one for the for loop, one for the function definition. So if I is even, then I want to append 3 to my list. So my list dot append 3. And there are a couple different options here. I think the most basic one is to say else. So this is what happens if the conditions above it were all false. So you just say else, you don't give a condition in this case. So else my list dot append 8. And then where should the return statement be? Well, we want it to be after the for loop. So we de-indent 2 times, and then we say return. And what do we want to return? Well, we want to return the list. So we want to return my list. Okay, let's see if it works. Alt 2 of 5. That looks good. Alt 2 of 6. It's always good to try like edge cases, or in this case, try cases of be sure you try at least one even and one odd length. Yep, this is also working. Let me show you an extremely similar way. Only difference is I'm going to replace this else with else if, which you don't write the S and the E in else if, you just write ELIF. And so this one does need a condition. So we only get here if this was false. So in that sense, it's the same as else. But we only go into this part if the condition that we give here is true. So here we'll say if it's odd, if I is an odd index. And so we've just overwritten the old definition of alt2. So let's see if it's working. That part is still working. And that part is still working, so that looks good. And in this case, because there are only two possibilities, uh, I mod 2 is 0 and I mod 2 is 1. The else and the elif I mod 2 equals 1, those are the exact same in this particular case. But if you have something with a lot of different possibilities, then you might find yourself wanting to use this elif with more possibilities in here. And you can also have multiple elifs if you want inside the same if condition. So for example, you could have else if I mod 2 equals 17 or whatever, but this will never happen because one of the first two is always going to be true, and this condition would always be false. But that's what I meant by saying you can have multiple elif statements inside the same if block. Okay, I think that is all I will do in this video. Thank you for watching.